we continue with the idea of treatment because it is so necessary to understand treatment, metaphysical treatment, from as many different points of view as is possible. And the question comes, is there any special treatment for eyes? Now, we took that up yesterday. The treatment is never for an effect. The treatment is never for what appears to be the condition. The treatment always consists of two parts: the realization of God as individual being, the realization of God as the only law, and then understanding that whatever appears in the form of discord and inharmony is part of that universal belief that never has power, presence, cause, reality, or law. Now, we won't go through all of that treatment. It was so complete yesterday that I could add nothing to it today. But you will have here a tape recording of yesterday's work on treatment and meditation. And I know that if you ask Mrs. Clow, it will be made available to you. And then you have all of the chapters on treatment in all of my writings, and they all follow this pattern. And then there's the question, is it all right to eat meat of all kinds? There is no such thing as right or wrong. There are different states of consciousness. And as students rise from one level of consciousness to another, their tastes change. And the thing that tasted good this year may not taste good next year. The food that is desirable this year may not be next year. But no one can judge for you as to what is right or wrong for you, nor can you judge as to what is right or wrong for your neighbor. Each one comes to that according to their own development. Has a truth teacher who smokes or drinks or does both really reached a state of consciousness that can deliver the message to the students? I don't know. I wouldn't imagine so if it were a spiritual teaching. But also I'm in that same position of not being able to judge what someone else can do. My experience has been that as we rise higher and higher in consciousness, that these tastes leave us. And just to accept these changes as they come to us is all that we can do without being concerned with the next one. When the concept of using vitamins, bath, diet for aids to our well-being are inconsistent with the information, please explain our wearing glasses. This is just as inconsistent. Just as inconsistent. Wearing glasses or wearing hearing aids or wearing any artificial aids or resorting to material means in any form is a suffer it to be so now. It is not in accord with the teaching. And the only reason that an exception is made in the wearing of glasses and hearing aids is that until the healing takes place, one would be left completely without the use of sight or hearing, and their whole service to their work would be impaired. And so as a suffer it to be so now, these artificial aids are tolerated, and even gratitude expressed that they're available. It doesn't change the fact, however, that they are not consistent with spiritual living. And As soon as the healing comes, they are discarded. Sometimes the healing comes much more quickly when one hasn't used artificial aids. But after one has used them or gotten accustomed to them, it would seem that at times they have a more difficult time in achieving their healing. Now, my attitude toward that is this, that if there is a discord or inharmony in our experience after we have achieved some measure of spiritual understanding, it is only that we may be pushed into a higher realization that we may not attain if there weren't some problem nagging at us. And so I look on these things as helps to our higher unfoldment. Sometimes when we have no problems, we are apt to lapse into a sense of human health or human wealth and get careless about continuing our spiritual development. But as far as consistency is concerned, be assured there is no consistency in the use of any material remedies. On the other hand, we are not in a position to tell anyone when they should discard their material remedies. We are only in a position to say that the object of our studies and the object of our meditations and treatments and prayers is to lift us above the sense of material aid. Please discuss excess weight. Yes, that is, as a rule, an overindulgence in appetite and can be controlled. As a matter of fact, there too, as one grows higher in spiritual consciousness, their excess appetites disappear, and so the adjustments come. Would you please speak about the appearance of change? Where do we go when we go on? I'm trying to overcome the fear of a so-called transition. All of that can be included in the word I. Close your eyes and say to yourself, I. Oh, say it to yourself, I. Several times. And as you do that, remember this, that I that you just voiced was the same I when you were 6 years of age, and 16, and 26, and 36, and 46, and will be the same at 106 and at 1,006. That I is ever with you. And it is that I that looks out upon this world, first from the standpoint of childhood and so on up to the age of maturity. And that I will never leave you nor forsake you. And should the time come when you make a transition that the world calls death, I will be standing there watching the entire process. You will be standing there watching the entire process, just as you were standing there watching yourself grow from childhood to adulthood. And so you will be standing there watching yourself grow from your present experience to whatever may be the next plane of existence. And it will be so gradual that you will no more notice it than you noticed passing from childhood to adulthood or from youth to maturity. It is a gradual process, and even though it seems to take but a minute of time, still it is so gradual that you are not aware of a transition taking place in any sense of discord or in harmony. The moment the transition has been accomplished, you will find that you appear to be just a few feet, 6, 8, 9 feet above your body. And the entire room will be visible, the entire circumstance will be visible to you. And you will go on with a great deal of joy and rejoicing, just as I'm sure the caterpillar must rejoice when it finds itself flying around as a butterfly. Because of the appearance of the body, because of theological fears engendered by the idea of punishment for sins, the idea of transition has become fearsome to us. It is only because it is associated in our minds with the possibility of hell, with the possibility of punishment for our earthly sins. And probably we deserve it because that's the way we treat our children, with continuous threats of punishment. And when we stop that, we ourselves will be released by the church, and they will stop threatening us with punishment to make us behave. Now, transition is a natural passage from one state of consciousness to another. And ordinarily, it is as painless and as free of discord as passing from 20 years of age to 21. Some few who suffer greatly through the fear of the experience only suffer that while they're still on this side, fearing the idea of punishment. The moment the transition has been made, that fear is gone. I said that the experience is a natural one. It is. It is. God is infinite. God is infinite in its forms and varieties. God is infinite in its manifestations and expressions. And not only that, but God, being infinite and complete, is forever unfolding to our view. And as it unfolds in the immaturity of childhood to the maturity of adulthood, so God continues unfolding to us in further forms and expressions of life. If God stopped unfolding in our consciousness at, say, 35 or 40 years of age, and we never went beyond that, we would be at a standstill. We would be at a place of stagnation. Life couldn't go on forever being just whatever it was at 35 or 40. It must continue unfolding because there is no end to God's goodness. Now, I know that the age of 35 or 40 or 45 seems to be about the best years of a person's life. And from the human standpoint of limitation, it would be wonderful to see it continuing at about that degree of maturity forever and forever and forever. But that would be limiting God. And God cannot be limited. There is no way to stop the activity of God's unfoldment as our good. Let us not resist it, and then we will find that should we make a transition, that it will be without disease, without old age, without being pushed out of the body. It will be a normal, natural transition from the caterpillar to the butterfly. It will be a natural, normal, painless, beautiful transition from high school to college. It will be an expanding consciousness of God's grace. When we relinquish the word death, And when we think of transition as a continuing unfoldment of God's grace, we will find that it will have none of the experiences or appearances of death. It all must take place within us, this understanding that there is no death. There is no death. That has merely been the invention of churches to frighten people. And I don't even mean the modern churches. It has been the invention of churches all through the ages to frighten people into being good. And there is no way to frighten people into being good except to threaten them with punishment. And so we have this idea, call it a boogaboo of death, as an invention of the church. And it has no existence outside of their teaching. No one has ever died. No one ever will die. No one has ever been punished, and no one ever will be punished. There is no such thing as punishment except the punishment that we give ourselves through accepting false standards of existence and violating our own false standards, or our own standards. Not false standards, but standards. In the same way that the principle of mathematics does not punish us for getting an incorrect answer in our checkbook, but our ignorance certainly punishes us. Our ignorance punishes us when we give out $5 for 2 twos. Our ignorance does that, not the principle of mathematics. And so it is when we violate what we know to be the spiritual laws of love, of life, of truth, of peace, integrity. When we violate that, there is a punishment, not from God, nor does that punishment come after death. That punishment comes right here and now, and not too long after the sin. As a matter of fact, it begins almost at the moment of the mistake itself. Sometimes it isn't evident to the outer world. Sometimes the outer world says, look at that sinner. He flourishes like the green bay tree and has no punishment. Well, that's because you can't read what's going on inside. When you see the explosion 5, 10, 20 years later, when you see them go out in great pain and distress, and then you say, his sins have caught up with him. They were catching up right from the moment that they were committed, only they weren't visible on the outside. And you all know that to be true because it's your own experience. It would be impossible for you to commit a wrong today and begin to get punished tomorrow. No, my friends. You know immediately when the error is committed, and it is that moment that you begin to suffer from it, even though the outer world may only notice it later. And so, we need have no fear of punishment. Our only concern must be the realization of God as an unfolding consciousness, an infinite unfolding consciousness of good, leading us on to ever greener pastures. God has never ordained evil for anyone. The will of God is good for everyone. We miss some of that will of God because of our violation of the principles of good, principles of love, life, truth, integrity. But God's will for us is good. And the moment we relax ourselves into God's will, that good begins to flow. It is in the same wise that this idea that God punishes people with volcanoes and tornadoes and locusts and wars and epidemics, those are all church inventions. Those were all made because the church had lost its power of spiritual discipline. And so it had to resort to human discipline. It is no different with parents. If parents understand children, they would never need to whip them, never need to beat them. That's inexcusable, or it's only excusable on the grounds that parents are ignorant. There is no such thing as a legitimate occasion ever to whip a child. The proof of that is that 30, 40 years ago, every parent whipped their child and thought it normal and natural, and even gave permission to the school teachers to do the same thing. And then somewhere 30, 40 years ago, parents realized that that was unnecessary for a school teacher, that if they knew their business, they could maintain discipline without beating. And so they took measures to see that school teachers no longer beat their children. But they never stopped to realize that if they themselves had any awareness of discipline, that they would not have to use force. There never has been a child in all the history of the world bad enough to merit a beating. And every beating given to a child represents the parents' lack of understanding of discipline, their lack of understanding of the care of children. It all goes back to the fact that it's too easy to have children. So it is, if you had a center and you had a degree of spiritual awareness, spiritual power, you would never have occasion to discipline or punish your students or your congregation. There is a spiritual discipline which is divine love, and it holds every person in harmony. And you would find that in the degree that the leader or teacher or practitioner had this sense of divine love, they would have that much less of insurrection, insubordination, resentment, and bad conduct in their center. But supposing the leader, the teacher, loses their spirituality, loses their contact with divine love, and then they have nothing left to rule with but punishment. And so we have excommunication, and so we have probation, and so we have church trials. They're inexcusable. And the only reason they exist is because of a lack of spiritual development on the part of the leaders. Where there is spiritual development, there is no need for excommunication, no need for punishments or probation. There may be occasionally a need for healing. Oh yes, it is human nature for people sometime or other to stray from the path of spiritual unfoldment. And so when the teacher, the leader, is wise in the spirit, they call that student or member to them, and through the discipline of love, bring them back into line, but not through the discipline of excommunication, not through the discipline of probation. That is a definite sign of a lack of spiritual development. Now, it is in the same wise that God has no need to punish us or throw us into outer darkness or give us any of these probationary periods as if we ourselves, by being punished, were going to get good. It is like the stupidity of war. There never has been a defeated nation that didn't get ready to justify itself and avenge itself immediately after its defeat. That's normal, that's natural. Every prize fighter who has been defeated, every champion who has been defeated, wants one more comeback. And we are the same way. Punish us, and our natural reaction is to get back at, to justify ourselves. And God is too wise to provide for such measures. No, the will of God for us is good, and is love, and is harmony. And let everyone accept the will of God as love, and then they will see that they cannot fear the period of transition. It is very hard to let the world go by, to be unmoved by the world picture when one has two sons, 18 and 20 years of age. To the degree that I can consciously live in God consciousness, will these boys be protected? In a measure, yes. In a measure, yes. In a measure that we live and move and have our being in God consciousness, all those within range of our thought receive some measure of benefit. But to make assurance doubly sure, the boys themselves should have some kind of awareness, some kind of knowledge of their approach to life. In other words, we know that they must submit to the draft. We know they must, if they're healthy, go into the army or the armed forces. And we know that if there's a war, that they must go out into battle. And even if there's not a war, they must go out into the undesirable atmosphere in which the Army and Navy moves. And it is an undesirable atmosphere from any spiritual standpoint. When, however, these boys carry with them at least a tiny measure of the realization of what they're about, they bring a measure of protection to themselves. And there is one simple rule that can be given them, and that I have found that the average youngster, more than the average, probably most of the youngsters that I've talked to are able to accept. And that is that they must understand that the soldiers of all lands are in uniform for the same reason they are, because it's orders from above. They must understand that just as they personally have no desire to go out and kill or injure or maim, neither have the boys on the other side of the line. Human nature is the same all over, and peace is the natural order of the human race. It is only an exceptional individual who has a warring nature. And unfortunately, those few have it to such an extent that they fight their way to the heads of governments and set in motion the wars that the rest of the world has to fight. Again, just like punishment represents a lack of spiritual development on the part of the church leader or the parent, in that same way, war represents a lack of intelligence on the part of national leaders. There has never been a war under an intelligent national leader. There has never been a war under a national leader with enough grain of intelligence, with even a grain of intelligence, to bring them in out of the rain. The unfortunate thing is that national leaders get to be national leaders without the intelligence that necessary to the fulfillment of their positions. Wars represent failure on the part of national leaders, for the same reason that fistfights among men on the street merely represent their lack of intelligence. Who has to indulge a fist fight? Anyone can settle any argument and any quarrel without that. So could any nation if it only had intelligent leadership. The history of the wars that have taken place in our time all indicate one thing, that the leaders concerned had no vision of the situation with which they found themselves confronted. All of them. There were no exceptions to that. None at all. All you have to do is study the history of the world, the things that led to war, the situations that brought war into existence, and you will know definitely that they could have been prevented. All wars could be prevented, but it takes intelligence to do that, and our leaders seem to have more political skill than natural intelligence. Or if it isn't political skill, perhaps the word skill includes some other qualities not so refined. But the soldier has no liking for war. No man and no boy in the street ever wanted war. No parent ever wanted war for its child. No child ever picked war for its destiny. And it is for this reason that everyone can accept the idea that every soldier feels the same as your son feels. They are there only as a matter of duty, a matter of patriotism, a matter of orders from higher up, and all are fulfilling their duty, rendering unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Once you recognize that this is true, once your boys recognize that this is true, they go out into their service without the animus, without the hate, without the desire for revenge, without the feeling that if we can just kill enough of the other side, our side will be happy and prosperous. And as they lose all of that fear, all of that feeling, they come under a law of love. The law of loving thy neighbor as thyself. They come under the law of forgiveness. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. You see, even when soldiers, under the stress of their living, do things that aren't even human, even then they must be understood and forgiven, because the atmosphere in which they're living brings it about. I had an opportunity to witness that first in the First World War, where I was stationed close to a well-known town, a southern town, a very quiet and peaceful one. And you wouldn't say that the boys in our outfit were any worse than your boys. We were all of the same type, of the same homes, some a little wealthier, some less, some a little more highly educated, some less, but we were just all average Americans, and with no ill will toward our neighbor. But you know that within 1 year after that camp was opened, in this little town 25 miles away, there were 700 illegitimate births. Well, now, that wasn't the enemy. That wasn't the enemy coming into the land and doing that. That was our own boys. And I saw the reason for it. The moment you get in uniform, you're anonymous. Can't see one face from another. All look alike, and the boys get the feeling that there's something set apart from ordinary human living, and they're capable of many things that they wouldn't be if they were in their own homes, under their family influences, and acting their normal lives. And then I saw it again in this last World War, when a year and a half after the war was over, friends of mine in Munich, where the American boys were stationed, wrote me that if war came between Russia and the Allies, that Germans would throw in with Russia, not with Americans, because of the unholy conduct of American boys in Munich. And the crimes charged against those boys were sinful, and they are, and they have since been proven true. And they're your boys, and they're my boys. They're all boys out of our own homes. But they're boys not acting as they did when they were in your home or mine, but as they acted out in uniform, out in bunkhouses, out in the element not natural to themselves, and it made them capable of things of which they could never be capable in normal circumstances. And so, if you had traveled as I have, 3/4 of this world, and for as many years, you would know the lesson that I have learned. There are no good races of people and no bad races of people. There is no such thing as a good race of people or a bad race of people. We are good and bad individually according to our own light. But usually we are very good because we are not thrown in the temptation of being bad. And when very often we are taken out of our natural element, we will act in ways that would not ordinarily be. And so do the Germans and the Japanese and all the rest of them. And so if you can impart to your boys that we are all equal and that we are all children of God, and that whatever it is that we do of an unnatural nature, of an evil nature, is not our own being, it is only the stress of circumstances, and bring into expression the law of loving our neighbor as ourselves. Make as many excuses for the other fellow as we make for ourselves. Make as many allowances and forgive 70 times 7. Then your boys carry with them the protection of divine love. Only as they bring hate, animosity, and the desire for revenge into their experience do they suffer the consequences of war. But they can be freed from most of those consequences merely by realizing that they should hold no hate, no malice, no desire for revenge, and understand that their job is merely one of suffer it to be so now. This is what we're ordered to do, and for the protection of our fellow man or fellow citizen, we are obeying the laws of the land. But even the laws of the land have no right to make us hate. Even the laws of the land have no right to make us violate our Christian integrity. And our Christian integrity demands that we pray for our neighbors. In World War II, I took care of many of the boys, sons of students and patients, but always with the same thing. I made it clear to them that I could pray, treat, I could help to maintain a certain degree of safety and security for them, but that the only assurance I could give them of their real safety would be in proportion as they would follow a simple rule that I gave them. Wake up and pray for your enemy first. Say no prayer for yourself. Say no prayer for your own people or your own troops. Make your first prayer on waking one for the enemy. Then, with whatever time was left over, do all the praying you wanted for your own and for your families and for your nation. But first, for those that persecute you, for those that hate you, for those that revile you. And you will find that in doing that, you are fulfilling the teaching of the Master. He told us to pray first for our enemy. The scribes, the Pharisees, they prayed for their friends, but it profiteth them nothing. You must pray for your enemy. And so it is with us. There is only one measure of safety and security in the world. You can't get that from an outside God. You can only get that from a state of consciousness of your own. And if yours is a state of consciousness of love, of forgiveness, of prayer, no evil can come nigh thy dwelling place. But it is your state of consciousness. It is not an outside God. If there were an outside God to protect you or your boys, be assured it would be protecting all boys everywhere. Since to God there can be no such thing as yours and mine. To God there are only children of God, whether they are of one nation or another. And so with us, this outside God is never going to protect you or me. But your state of consciousness is, and if it is a state of consciousness of love and forgiveness, loving your neighbor as yourself, loving your enemy, praying for your enemy, praying for those who despitefully use you, that state of love will be the dwelling place. That will be the secret place of the Most High. And I say to you, as a final word, the secret place of the secret place of the Most High is a capital Love, nothing else. If we are not to petition God, then of what avail to say, God bless a dear one? And you know, I kept this question to the last because it's the most important of all. And I would like, when you leave, to carry that answer with you. Saying, God bless you, is not a power and is of no avail. Saying, God bless you, is of no more avail than for someone to say the opposite, damn you. That also is of no avail. The saying of a statement, the voicing of it, is not the power. The power lies in what we hold in consciousness. And if we hold in consciousness the realization of God as every man's right, that is the blessing, whether we voice it or not. And so the voicing of it merely is the human way of letting you know that it's in our heart. It is just like our coming to the platform and saying good afternoon. There's no value to saying good afternoon except that it puts in words what we're thinking in the heart. But if you could separate the thinking in the heart from the words of the mouth, you'd have no power. And so we could say good afternoon, and we could say aloha, and we could say I love you, and it would be meaningless. Unless in here was an emotion of love, a feeling of love, then the good afternoon imparts to you in words the inner feeling and greeting. But I'm sure you know this, that even if that good afternoon weren't mentioned, you would feel it. You would feel it. If you never heard good afternoon or good evening, you would feel it. It is very much like our dear ones. We do once in a while say, I love you. I don't think any of our dear ones need to hear those words because they have a better gauge than those words. They have our actions. They have our conduct. They have our attitude when we're with each other. And yet, once in a while, we say it because it sounds good to the ears. And so, with God bless you, so it is with our aloha. Nothing is more beautiful than that word aloha, to those who understand it. A greeting on meeting and a greeting on parting, a greeting of love, a greeting of affection, a greeting of warmth, a salutation, or even a Godspeed is in that word aloha. But in the same way, without that word, we have every right to say Godspeed you, or God bless you, or God greet you. But the words themselves have no power. It is the emotion, the feeling that we have that is the power. Now then, what do we mean when we say God bless you? We do not mean God bless you. We mean God is blessing you. There is no such thing as God will. There is no such thing as I hope that God will, or that I am asking God to bless you, since man, please carry this with you, man does not influence God. And so to say, God bless you, is a reminder to you that God is blessing you. It is not a prayer offered up that I can influence God to bless you. Understand that the same as you do with saying grace at table. Some people voice their grace outwardly, openly. We do not. But surely we couldn't eat a bite without an inner recognition of God as the source. But that in no wise is asking God to send supply. It is a recognition of God as the source of supply. And so, when you say, God bless you, in the recognition that God is the source of your blessing, then indeed does your blessing act as a treatment or prayer. If you say, God bless you, thinking to bring God's blessing to one, you miss the point and miss the prayer. If in saying God bless you, you bring to it the realization that God is the source of your continuous blessing, that is a treatment, that is a prayer, that is a divine realization, and it carries great power with it. So wherever we go, whatever we do, we should be remembering, God bless you. Whether we say it openly and outwardly, whether we voice it only within our heart, or whether it is just a thought of recognition, God is blessing you. God is the source of your blessing. Then you may be assured that, uttered or unexpressed, it is a treatment, it is a prayer, and it is a blessing. Only always separate the essence of prayer from the voicing of prayer. In order that prayer be a blessing, there must be the essence of it, the inner recognition, not merely the outer words. I'm sure you all have been in churches and heard someone recite the Lord's Prayer as if they were on the way to a fire and had to get it all in before they got around the corner. Now you see, that is not a prayer, and that is not a blessing. That is a recitation. And it is in the same way that many of you may have heard the Lord's Prayer voiced as an oration with gestures. Also, that is not a prayer. That is not a blessing. That is an act. But the Lord's Prayer, voiced or not voiced, thought with integrity, with sincerity, with love, becomes a blessing. And so with all of our work, the words that we utter are of no importance. The essence, the activity, the love that we put into the words or the thoughts are the blessings. And so above all things, let us be sure to bless everyone on their way at all times, and bless them not merely with words and not with the belief that we are asking God to bless anyone, but in the conviction that God is the blessing of everyone. And there we are. Thank you.